The morning sun rose gently over Umuokwe, spilling golden light across the thatched roofs and the long, winding footpaths that snaked through the village like ancient veins. The air was alive with the rhythm of drums, their deep, steady beats calling out to every soul within earshot that this was no ordinary day. From the elders who sat under the giant iroko tree to the children chasing one another barefoot through the dusty paths, everyone knew this was the day Amara, the pride of the village, would become a wife. Women with bright headscarves moved briskly between clay huts, their hands busy pounding yam, stirring steaming pots of egusi soup, and roasting plantain over open fires, while the sweet scent of palm wine floated through the air. Chickens clucked nervously as they were caught, goats bleated in the distance, and somewhere in the background, a flute sang a melody that sounded as old as the hills themselves. Amara, hidden away in her mother's small mud house, sat quietly on a wooden stool as her aunties worked around her, tying coral beads around her neck and wrists, carefully arranging the folds of her deep red wrapper, and painting her hands with intricate patterns of camwood paste. She did not speak much, only smiled shyly when the women teased her about her wedding night, her heart beating faster with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. Outside, her groom Cheek stood tall and proud in a white agbada, trimmed with gold, greeting elders, shaking hands, and trying to hide the impatience in his eyes. For months he had dreamed of this day, counting each sunrise until Amara would finally walk into his home as his wife. Yet, even in the joy of the moment, something strange hung quietly in the air, a feeling that not everyone could name. Mama Ifioma, Amara's mother, kept glancing at her daughter with a tight smile, her fingers never resting as she adjusted beads, straightened wrappers, and muttered small prayers under her breath. The night before, she had woken to find a dead bird lying at their doorstep, its feathers black and stiff, its lifeless eyes staring into the darkness. She had swept it away before anyone could see, but the image had not left her mind. In the corner, Elder Okoro, the most respected man in the village, sat quietly watching, his walking stick resting across his lap, his old eyes unreadable as they followed Amara's every movement. No one knew that deep inside, beneath the surface of the laughter, the dancing, and the sound of talking drums, a shadow was already stretching toward the young bride, ready to swallow the joy of this day before the moon could rise. The wedding began with the sound of the village gong, its deep clang echoing through the farmlands, and drawing people from every corner of Umuokwe toward the open square where the celebration would take place. Mats woven from palm fronds were spread on the ground, and wooden benches were arranged in a great circle, leaving space in the centre for dancers to whirl and stomp to the beat of the talking drums. The elders took their places first, their voices rumbling in low conversations about the day's good fortune, while the younger men carried in giant calabashes of palm wine, pouring it into smaller gourds for guests. The women, their wrappers tied tightly around their waists, moved like a river of colour, carrying steaming bowls of pepper soup, platters of jollof rice glowing red with tomatoes and spices, and fried meat glistening in the sun. Amara appeared at last, led by her aunties, her head slightly bowed, her coral beads clinking softly as she walked. The crowd erupted in ululations and clapping. Children danced ahead of her, and the drummers quickened their rhythm as if to welcome her every step. Chaik could not take his eyes off her. To him, she looked like a goddess sent down from the heavens. They sat side by side beneath a canopy, decorated with palm leaves and fresh flowers, accepting blessings, prayers, and small gifts from friends and family. But even in the warmth of the celebration, Mama Ifeoma's eyes kept scanning the crowd, and she noticed Elder Okoro whispering to another elder, their faces grave. When the sun began to sink, painting the sky in shades of orange and crimson, the drums slowed and the first stars blinked awake above the village. It was then, as the women gathered to lead Amara to her new home, that the unthinkable happened. One moment she was there, smiling shyly, her hand in her mother's, and the next she was gone. No one saw her leave, no one heard her footsteps, no one noticed any movement in the crowd. It was as if the air itself had swallowed her. For a heartbeat, the square fell silent, the drums stopping mid-beat, the dancers frozen where they stood. Then the panic began: shouts, questions, the sound of feet running in every direction. Chaik's voice rose above them all, raw and desperate, calling her name again and again into the thickening night. The village square, once alive with music and laughter, had turned into a restless sea of confusion. Torches were lit in haste, their flames flickering wildly in the night breeze, casting long shadows on the clay walls and dancing in the fearful eyes of the people. Men grabbed machetes and lanterns, some running toward the riverbank, others disappearing into the dense bush paths that led out of the village. The women huddled together, murmuring prayers, some wailing softly, their voices rising and falling like waves against the shore. Mama Ifeoma's wrapper had come loose at the waist as she stumbled from one corner of the square to another, asking anyone who would listen, "Have you seen my daughter? Please, tell me you've seen my Amara." But each answer was the same: a slow shake of the head, a downcast gaze, a whisper of pity. Chaik had already disappeared into the darkness, calling Amara's name as he pushed through the undergrowth, his white agbada now torn and stained with mud. Elder Okoro stood apart from the chaos, leaning heavily on his staff, his eyes scanning the treetops and the empty paths, as though he was looking for something only he could see. In the distance, the sound of the talking drums began again, but this time it was not for celebration. The rhythm was slow, deep, and mournful, carrying a message to neighbouring villages. A bride had gone missing. Old women muttered that such a thing had not happened in Umuokwe for more than 40 years, and even then the girl had never been found. Somewhere near the edge of the forest, a dog began barking furiously, then whimpering before going silent, as if cowed by something unseen. The search went on into the early hours of the morning, feet pounding the dusty paths, voices hoarse from shouting her name, but not a single bead from her jewellery, not a single tear from her wrapper, was found. And as the moon hung high and cold over the silent village, a thought began to take root in the hearts of many. Perhaps Amara had not been taken by human hands at all. By morning, the village was heavy with silence, the kind that presses against your chest and makes every sound feel too loud. The search had brought nothing but tired feet and dry throats, yet no one could bring themselves to stop looking. Children peeked out from behind doorways, wide-eyed, while the elders gathered beneath the Iroko tree, their voices hushed but urgent. Words like omen, curse, and debt slipped between them, each one carrying the weight of fear. Mama Ifeoma sat outside her hut, her head in her hands, rocking gently as women tried to comfort her, though their own eyes betrayed the same dread. Then Elder Okoro rose from his seat, leaning on his staff, and called for silence. His voice was not loud, but it carried, slicing through the air like the first crack of thunder before a storm. "This is not the first time," he said, his gaze sweeping over the gathered faces. "Many of you were not yet born, but 41 years ago, on a night much like this, another bride vanished before she could cross the threshold of her husband's home. Her name was Ngozi, and she was never seen again." A murmur ran through the crowd, the old women nodding slowly, remembering. Elder Okoro's eyes darkened as he continued. "Our fathers knew the truth then, but they kept it hidden to protect the village. A debt was owed to the spirits of the sacred grove. A promise was broken, and since then, the grove has claimed what it is owed." Cheek, exhausted and covered in dust, stepped forward, his voice shaking with anger. "What debt? What promise? And what does it have to do with my wife?" Elder Okoro's lips pressed into a thin line. Your wife is the daughter of the man who broke the pact. The grove remembers, even when men choose to forget. His words hung in the air, heavy and inescapable, and for the first time, many in the village dared to look toward the thick wall of trees at the edge of the land, the place they had always been told never to enter after sunset. That night, when the moon was a pale ghost behind drifting clouds, Chaik sat alone in his mother's compound, staring at the small oil lamp flickering before him. His clothes were still dusty from the day's search, but he did not feel the weight in his body, only in his chest, where every heartbeat seemed to echo Amara's absence. Mama Ifioma had come to him earlier, her eyes red from crying, and begged him to wait, to let the elders handle it. But Cheek knew that waiting would only let fear take root. The sacred grove was forbidden for a reason. But what was a law to a man whose bride had been stolen from his arms? He rose quietly, wrapping a dark wrapper around his shoulders, and took only a small calabash of water, his father's machete, and a piece of kola nut. The village slept around him, though a few dogs lifted their heads and growled as he passed, as if sensing the path he was about to take. At the edge of the village, where the yam farms ended and the first shadow of the forest began, he paused. The air there was different, cooler, heavy, with a faint smell of wet earth, and something older, something like the scent of rain that had not yet fallen. Somewhere in the darkness, an owl called once, and then all was silent. Chaik stepped forward. The thick undergrowth seemed to close behind him as he moved, and the light of the moon faded beneath the canopy. Every step was slower than the last, each sound the crunch of dry leaves, the snap of twigs too loud in his ears. He remembered the stories from his childhood, of spirits that could wear the face of a loved one, of whispers that could lead a man in circles until the dawn found him dead on his feet. Still, he pressed on, his voice low as he called her name. Amara. The sound seemed to vanish into the dark, swallowed by the grove. Then, from somewhere deep within, came the faintest reply, soft, almost like a sigh. It was her voice. Cheek froze where he stood, his breath caught in his throat. The sound had been faint, almost like a dream, but he knew the shape of that voice as well as he knew his own heartbeat. Amara, he called again, louder this time, and there it was once more, drifting through the trees. It was weak, trembling, but it was hers. He quickened his steps, pushing aside branches that scratched at his skin, following the voice as it seemed to float just ahead of him. The deeper he went, the thicker the air became, until it felt like he was walking through water. The ground grew soft beneath his feet, the smell of damp earth and strange flowers filling his nostrils. In the shadows, eyes seemed to glimmer too high, too still, to belong to any animal he knew. Then he saw it, a faint light, glowing between the twisted roots of a massive tree, its trunk so wide it would take 10 men to encircle it. And there, sitting at the base, was Amara. Her wrapper was torn, her beads broken, her eyes glassy, as though she had been staring at something only she could see. But before Chaik could reach her, a shape moved from the other side of the tree, tall, thin, its skin the colour of ash, its eyes glowing like embers. Its voice was deep and hollow, like the wind speaking through a hollow log. "She does not belong to you tonight," it said. Cheek gripped his machete, his voice breaking with rage. "She is my wife," the figure tilted its head slowly. "And she is our payment. 41 years ago, her father came to us, asking for wealth and favour. He swore his first daughter would walk into the grove on her wedding night. We have come to collect." The light flickered, and the shadows grew longer, curling around Chaik's legs like smoke. Chaik's grip on the machete tightened until his knuckles ached, But the spirit only stood there, unmoving, as if it had all the time in the world. The silence between them was heavy, broken only by the faint rustle of leaves high above. Amara's eyes flickered toward him, and for a moment her lips parted, as if she wanted to speak, but no sound came out. The spirit took a step forward, and with it came a chill that sank deep into Cheek's bones. "Put down the blade," it said, "or the grove will take you as well." Chike swallowed hard, but did not lower his hand. "If you wanted payment, you should have taken her father, not her. She has done nothing wrong." The spirit's mouth curled into something like a smile, though it was a smile without warmth. "The debt is not for the guilty," it said. "It is for the promised. Her father's blood runs in her veins. That is enough." Cheek shook his head fiercely. "Then take me instead. I will give my life if you let her go." The spirit tilted its head again, studying him as if weighing the offer. "Your life?" it repeated slowly, almost tasting the words. "A husband's sacrifice in place of the bride. Yes, the grove would accept that. But know this, it is not a quick death we would give you. You would serve us until the last leaf falls from the last tree, and even then your name would be forgotten." Chike felt his chest tighten. He had expected death, but not this, not to be erased from the memory of the living. He looked at Amara again. A single tear rolled down her cheek. She mouthed one word, "No." The spirit extended a long, pale hand toward him. "Choose, son of the living. The night grows old." The night seemed to hold its breath, every leaf and branch frozen in place, as Chike stood there, between the pull of his heart and the weight of his fear. The spirit's hand remained outstretched, long fingers curling slightly, as if it could already feel the warmth of his palm. Chike's mind raced flashes of his childhood, of running barefoot along the dusty paths with his brothers, the laughter of his mother as she pounded yam in the courtyard, the proud face of his father when he killed his first goat for the new yam festival. All of it would vanish if he stepped forward. His name, his face, his very story would dissolve into the shadows of the grove until even the earth forgot he had once walked upon it. But then he thought of Amara, the way her eyes had always softened when she looked at him, the sound of her laughter when he teased her at the stream, the way she had stood by him, even when the elders had doubted his worth. He remembered the day he had gone to her family's hut to ask for her hand, how she had stood behind her mother, pretending to look shy while her lips fought to hide a smile. She was not just his bride. She was the reason he woke each morning, believing that the world was still good. He could not, would not leave her in the cold grasp of something that saw her as nothing more than a debt to be paid. His legs trembled as he took one step toward the spirit, then another. "I will go," he said, his voice steady, though his heart pounded like the drums on the day of harvest. The spirit's ember eyes brightened, and the ground beneath them seemed to hum with approval. "You choose well," it said, lowering its hand until it hovered just above Cheek's chest. A wave of cold surged through him, seeping into his bones, pulling at something deep inside, not his breath, not his blood, but the very thread that tied him to the living. Amara cried out then, her voice breaking through the still air. "No, please no." She tried to rise, but the shadows around the great tree tightened like ropes, holding her in place. Chike turned to her, forcing a small smile. "Live for me, Amara," he whispered, before the spirit's hand pressed against his chest. In that instant, the world around him shattered into darkness. He felt himself falling, not through space, but through time, through memories, through every face and name he had ever known, and one by one they slipped away like grains of sand between his fingers. His body crumpled to the forest floor, lifeless to the eye, but his spirit was already being carried deep into the roots of the grove, where whispers, in a language older than the village, welcomed him into their endless service. The great tree's roots pulsed faintly, as though drinking in something unseen. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the shadows released Amara, and she collapsed forward, gasping, her hands clawing at the earth. The spirit looked down at her, its voice softer now. "The debt is paid. Go, and do not return to this place." And without another word, it melted into the darkness between the trees, leaving her alone with the still body of the man who had given up his very existence to set her free. The air in the grove was still heavy with the whispers of the ancient trees, their branches swaying as if they too were burdened by the choices Amara had made. She stood at the heart of the clearing, her hands trembling at her sides, staring at the ground as if it might offer her a way back to a time before the oath. The shadows of the leaves shifted across her face, casting fleeting shapes that mirrored the confusion in her heart. Eldrin lingered nearby, his expression a complex weave of pride, regret, and fear. He had seen many before her take the path she now walked, and he knew all too well the weight it would press upon her soul. "You've bound yourself," he said quietly, his voice almost lost to the wind. "There is no turning back from this." Amara's eyes lifted to meet his, defiance burning through the sorrow that threatened to consume her. "I chose this," she replied, though the words came out as much to convince herself as to answer him, "and I'll carry it." Somewhere in the distance, the faint call of a night bird broke the tension, and the forest seemed to lean in, listening. Amara could feel the magic pulsing faintly beneath her skin, an unsteady rhythm that reminded her with every beat of the power and danger now tethered to her spirit. She turned away from Eldrin and walked slowly toward the edge of the grove, where the golden light of the fading day bled into the darkening woods. Behind her, Eldrin's voice came again, softer now. "The price will be more than you expect. It always is." She did not look back. The path before her was uncertain, but she felt its pull like a tide she could not resist. Every step forward seemed to hum with the echo of her decision, and though her heart ached, her resolve hardened. Somewhere beyond the trees lay the next trial, the next revelation. And though the night was falling fast, Amara walked on, determined to face it. Night closed in quickly as Amara pressed deeper into the forest. The air cooled, and the sounds of the day faded into a chorus of crickets and the distant howl of something unseen. The path beneath her feet was little more than a thread of earth, winding between roots that clawed up from the ground like the fingers of long-dead giants. Her mind was a whirlwind, half memory, half fear, yet her steps remained steady. The magic within her pulsed again, stronger now, as though responding to the encroaching darkness. Every heartbeat seemed to send ripples through the world around her. Shadows shifted in ways that defied the wind, and the air shimmered faintly, like heat on stone. She paused once, her eyes catching on a shape between the trees, tall, unmoving, and wrong. But when she blinked, it was gone. Eldrin's warning echoed in her head. "The price will be more than you expect." She wanted to push the words away, but they clung to her thoughts like burrs, catching each time she tried to think of anything else. Somewhere in her chest, beneath the magic and the fear, a stubborn ember of determination burned. She had chosen this, and no matter the cost, she would see it through. The forest eventually opened into a hollow, where moonlight spilled like silver water over a pool. The surface was still, glass-like, reflecting the night sky perfectly. As she approached, the reflection wavered not from her movement, but from something stirring beneath the water. She knelt, breath held, as a pale hand broke the surface and gripped the stone edge. The figure that emerged was neither wholly human nor entirely spirit. Its eyes glowed faintly, and its voice came in a whisper that felt older than the forest itself. "You carry what was lost," it said, "and you will carry it until the end." Amara's fingers curled into fists. Then tell me where the path leads. The figure only smiled, a sorrowful, knowing curve of the lips, before sinking back into the water without another sound. Amara rose, her reflection now alone in the pool. She turned from it and stepped back into the trees, her resolve tested but unbroken. The moon hung high as Amara moved onward, her steps taking her deeper into the wild heart of the forest. The air seemed to grow heavier, each breath laced with the scent of damp earth and ancient wood. Her magic hummed faintly in her veins, a constant reminder that her journey was no longer one of flesh alone. In the distance, faint lights flickered between the trunks, swaying as though caught on an unseen tide. At first, she thought they might be fireflies, but their glow was steady, deliberate, like lanterns carried by unseen hands. She approached cautiously, her fingers brushing the hilt of the dagger at her belt. The lights led her to a ring of standing stones, each etched with runes that pulsed in time with her heartbeat. The air here was colder, charged with the energy of something vast and watchful. Amara stepped inside the circle, and the forest around her seemed to hold its breath. From the shadows beyond the stones, a figure stepped forward, cloaked in black, face hidden. It moved with a grace that made no sound. "You've come farther than most," the figure said, voice low and smooth. "But distance means nothing if you don't understand the road." Amara squared her shoulders. "Then teach me." The figure tilted its head, as though weighing her worth. "Every lesson has its price. Yours will be paid in what you cannot spare." A cold shiver ran through her, but she did not flinch. "I've already given more than I thought I had." The figure extended a hand, palm open. The runes on the stones flared brighter, and the air seemed to thicken until each breath felt like pulling water into her lungs. "Then give the rest," it whispered. And with that, the circle began to close. The runes pulsed faster, their light crawling across the stones like veins of molten silver. Amara felt the invisible walls pressing closer, the air itself growing dense, heavy with a presence that seemed to push against her chest. Her fingers tightened on the dagger, though she knew deep down that no blade could cut the kind of bonds she felt now. The figure's hand remained outstretched, patient but unyielding. "This is the last threshold," it said, its voice bypassing her ears entirely and settling cold in her mind. "You may pass through, but you will leave something behind." Her pulse pounded in her skull. "What do you want?" she asked, though dread curled around the edges of her thoughts. The figure tilted its head. "Not gold, nor blood. I want the memory of your peace, the quiet moments, the soft laughter, the warmth you've carried like a secret fire. Give them to me, and you will walk into the truth." Her chest clenched. Images flickered her mother's gentle smile, the evenings by the hearth, the golden hush of dawn breaking over the fields, the weightless joy of watching rain trace patterns on the window. To lose these was to lose the anchor that had kept her from being swept entirely into shadow. But the path ahead would not wait, and turning back was no longer possible. She stepped forward, her hand trembling as it met the figure's. A cold shock flooded her arm, sinking deep into her bones. One by one, her most precious memories dissolved, thinning into pale smoke that slipped away into the dark. The pressure of the circle eased. The runes dulled, their glow receding into the stone. The figure's grip loosened. "Go," it murmured. "The rest of your journey will have no place for light." Amara walked into the newly opened path, her heart a hollow chamber where warmth had once lived. She was empty, but the emptiness left only space for resolve. Somewhere ahead, the truth waited, and she would meet it stripped of all comfort, but unbroken. The tunnel beyond the threshold sloped downward, the stone floor slick with condensation. Each step sent echoes bouncing into the dark, but no sound returned in the same rhythm. Something ahead was moving, adjusting to her presence. The air was colder now, with a metallic tang that clung to the back of her throat. Her mind felt strangely quiet, without the comfort of her memories. The emptiness was sharp, almost clean, like a blade honed for one purpose. She pressed forward, drawn by a faint glimmer in the distance. The passage opened into a vast cavern, its ceiling lost in shadow. In the centre stood an obsidian pillar, runes spiralling upward in twisting bands of faint light. At its base knelt a man, shackled with chains that shimmered as if woven from moonlight. His eyes lifted to hers eyes, that burned with the same hue as the runes she had just left behind. "Amara," he rasped, her name spilling from his lips, as if it had been kept there for years. "You've come too far. Turn back before the bargain takes more than you can give." She stepped closer, her voice steady. "I've already given more than I thought possible. I won't stop now." The man's gaze hardened, but there was sorrow there too. "Then you must understand. This place does not release what it claims. You are already bound." Before she could reply, the runes on the pillar flared, bathing them both in cold light. The chains tightened, dragging him to his knees, and a whisper rose from the stone beneath her feet, a whisper that carried her name, like a promise and a warning, all at once. The whisper grew louder, threading through the air like smoke, curling around her ears until it was all she could hear. Her knees trembled under the weight of it, though she did not fall. Each syllable seemed to strike against her chest, echoing in the hollow spaces left where her memories had been. The shackled man's voice was strained now, as though he fought against not only the chains but the voice itself. "Don't answer it, Amara. If you speak back, you'll seal what's left of your fate." But the whisper was insistent, tender in tone, yet heavy with command. "We have walked together longer than you know. Your steps are mine, your breath a gift from me. You are not losing yourself. You are becoming what you were meant to be." The pillar's runes pulsed faster, and the cavern seemed to tighten, the shadows pressing closer. She could feel something immense just out of sight, like a presence coiled in the dark, watching her with patient hunger. "Tell me what it wants," she demanded, but the man only shook his head, pain flashing in his eyes. "It doesn't want," he said. "It takes. And once it has taken all, it will wear your voice, your face, and no one will know you are gone." The cold light from the pillar seeped into her skin now, threading into her veins, and she realized she was standing closer than she remembered moving. Her hand hovered over the stone. It was warm to the touch, alive, and the whisper was no longer just in her ears. It was inside her head, steady and certain. "One touch, and all your questions will have answers." Amara's hand hovered, fingers trembling inches above the pulsing runes. The warmth was almost soothing, like a hearth in winter, yet beneath it lurked a strange, living thrum that seemed to match the beat of her heart. She knew that if she touched it, there would be no turning back. The shackled man strained forward, chains rattling in sharp protest. "Amara, listen to me. Every soul that's touched that stone has vanished. They walk out in the same skin, but they are not the same. They serve it." The whisper coiled tighter in her mind, drowning his warnings. "You've been wandering in the dark your whole life. I will light the way. I will make you whole." Her breathing quickened. The faces of those she'd lost flashed in her mind. Her mother's smile, her father's voice, the laughter of friends she couldn't save. Could this thing really give her the answers, the power to change it all? The man's voice cracked with desperation. "It lies. It will twist you until you forget who you were. You'll think the choice was yours, but it won't be." The cavern shook faintly, dust drifting down from the unseen ceiling. The pillar's glow intensified, bathing them both in a pale, unearthly light. Amara's arm ached from resisting the pull, every instinct screaming in opposite directions, one toward safety, one toward the unknown. The whisper became a roar in her mind. One touch, and you will never be powerless again. Her eyes met the man's one last time. His expression was a fragile mix of terror and sorrow, as if he already knew what she would choose. And then she moved.